All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another Trimmed and Burning Bible study, the book of Revelation. I lost track of how many parts we're at, but we're in chapter 5. That's the important part. So we're in chapter 5, starting that today. We finished chapter 4 last week, and we'll just recap briefly, which obviously is important. It plays into what we're going to talk about today, because remember, Revelation chapter 1 is he gets this revelation that he's going to have to write all these things down. Revelation 2 and 3 was to the 7 churches, right? He wrote to the 7 churches of what was going on in their present, and then these are the things to come. This is what's beginning. And of course, we know this is right, we've read the book before, it's right before the judgments, but these chapters 4 and 5 is the heavenly throne room, where John's been taken up into heaven. Remember, he got called up to heaven to see all these things going on in heaven, right, at God's throne. We just talked about how the tabernacle and the temple down on earth was replicas, basically earthly replicas of what's going on in heaven. We've got some evidence of that, but Verse 4 said, around the throne were 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones were 24 elders, clothed in white garments with golden crowns on their heads. I talked about how this represents all the believers. I talked about how it's probably the 12 tribes and the 12 disciples, but maybe it's not actually them, but maybe representative of them. But it's referring to God's redeemed people. We see the white garments, the golden crowns, all those things, the rewards, all those things that Jesus promised to those who conquered. And of course, he conquered, which is why we conquer, right, through him. And that was around the throne. I also talked about how in Daniel, he probably saw these thrones. He had a vision, but they were empty. And now they're filled because Jesus has completed that work when he died on the cross and resurrected from the dead. So now they're seated there. And even Ephesians 2, if you remember, it says we are seated in heavenly places with the Lord. So also goes along. I didn't mention that last time. From the throne came flashes of lightning and rumblings of peals of thunder. Before the throne were burning 7 torches of fire, which are the 7 spirits of God that I talked about. That's the coming judgment. You can see stored up and all this great power of the Lord. And before the throne there was as a sea of glass like crystal, and the 4 creatures. So I talked about those 4 creatures that Ezekiel's seen, Isaiah's seen creatures singing holy, holy, holy. You see them. But the sea of glass, remember, it's that still water, right? Because everything is peaceful, calm, God's under control. There's no more cleansing going on. We've all been cleansed. We don't need to be cleansed anymore in his presence. It's all there, and everything is still and calm. The opposite of the stormy water. And it's probably when Jesus settled the storms, when it was all stormy and all those waves, he had Peter step out on those storms, it was probably looking something like this, still water after Jesus calmed that storm, right? The still as glass. It looks almost like a sheet of glass. First living creature was like a lion, second living creature like an ox, third one was like a man, the fourth was like an eagle. I talked about all these different attributes of Jesus, right? The lion, his power and majesty, kingship. The ox is the servant, face of the man, the intelligence, an eagle, showing the heavenly realm, right? All the aspects of the Lord, and they have these in all of creation as well, I talked about. The lion would be the wild beast. The ox is like the livestock. Of course, man is us, and the eagle, the birds. This also symbolizes all of God's creation, which was a topic and focus in this chapter 4. All the 4 living creatures with 6 wings, which sounds a lot like what Isaiah saw in chapter 6. They had eyes all around them, means they were very aware. They sang, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. That's past, present, and future. He's over all of time. He's in eternity. And whenever living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him who is seated on the throne, who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him who is seated on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever. They cast their crowns before the throne. So remember, they cast those crowns that were given to them by the Lord. And I talked about how back in the day, the Roman emperors would have kings under them, and these kings would lay down their thrones and they'd meet with them, and then he'd pick them back up and place them on their heads. Probably something like this going on here, but this is showing that they are not worthy. Even the crowns we have, we did not earn them. Even though it's Stephanos, a victor's crown, we're only victorious through the Lord, so we lay them down at his feet to symbolize that. They said, worthy are you, O Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they existed and were created. And that was the focus of this. God is great and glorious because he created all things, and by his will they were created. Colossians even talks about that. Jesus is preeminent. Everything holds together because of him. Everything came into being because of God. And this whole chapter was worshiping him, or they were worshiping him as creator. So everything was focused on creation here. And now it's going to shift in chapter 5 here, but it's still going to be in that heavenly throne room. So you can go ahead and, if you haven't already, turn to Revelation chapter 5, and we'll jump right in to verse 1 here. Then I saw on the right hand of him who is seated on the throne a scroll written within and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. That's actually where I got the picture from the front cover. That's seven seals. 7 sealed scroll here. Who says, then I saw on the right hand of him who is seated on the throne, right hand. We actually talk about this like somebody's their right hand man, right? Right hand is an authority. There's power, so it's authority, power, and possession. And you can also see it says, then I saw. So there's kind of like this change. He saw these, he saw the throne, he saw the elders around it, and he's like, wow, this is glorious. Remember, he saw that rainbow, all these beautiful colors. He says, then I saw. It's that transition. Now he's noticing something else, and he's noticing the one who is seated on the throne, and then a scroll written within and on the back, right? Which is really interesting. It was sealed within, and it was written on both sides, I believe it says, but scroll written within and on the back. So it means it was written on both sides. Now, back then, it wasn't common for that to happen. Just be like us. We usually write on one side, right? And then if you roll something up, we don't really use scrolls like they do now. But scroll would only be written on one side. The fact that it's written on both sides shows like this completeness and fullness, like there's nothing else that could be written on it. There's no more space for new revelation. This is all of God's plan, we believe, written on front and back, and there's nothing more that could be added because there's no more space. So that's why I believe it's written on the front and on the back. And again, you can see that this whole chapter is going to be focused. We're going from the throne. Everything was focused on the throne and creation. Now we're going to go to the scroll and redemption. So those are kind of the two themes, probably why it's split up into two chapters. Because remember, ironically, all these things were scrolls back in the day. There were no books and chapters like there are now. But we break them up. Chapter 4 is about creation. Chapter 4 is about the scroll and redemption. But turn to Ezekiel chapter 2, because this is really interesting to see. Ezekiel chapter 2, verse 9 and 10. Now, last week we were in Ezekiel chapter 1, if you remember, because Ezekiel saw the heavenly throne room the heavenly throne room, the throne kind of showed up to him. Remember, it was like mobile, had the wheels and stuff, and it showed up while I was in Babylon. And then we found out John actually saw it when he got taken to the throne room. But now we're in Ezekiel chapter 2, verse 9 and 10. And we're going to look at it. There's a scroll here. And this was to pronounce judgment on Israel. So there's judgment in this scroll. And let's read about what it says here in Ezekiel chapter 2, verse 9 and 10. Here's what verse 9 says. And when I looked, behold, a hand was stretched out to me. And behold, a scroll of a book was in it. And he spread it before me. And look at this. And it had writing on the front and on the back. And there were written on it words of lamentation and mourning and woe. So you can see in Ezekiel, he had to open this scroll. There's a scroll handed to him, but this scroll here in Ezekiel is judgment on Israel. Now, this scroll, as we know, is going to have judgment not directly on Israel. Israel will be on the earth here, but there's judgment on the earth dwellers, as we call them, right? Those who are earth-focused. It talks about the earth dwellers. This scroll is going to have a lot of judgment, and like I keep saying in chapter 6 on, you see those judgments come out. What's really interesting is right here in Ezekiel, it says, written on it were words of lamentation, mourning, and woe. And if you get later on in Revelation, you'll see the woes. If you remember the woes of Revelation. So you can see that connection again. This has happened before. A scroll written on the front and the back symbolized judgment on Israel. This time it symbolizes judgment on the whole world. So something similar going on here. We believe this scroll has all of God's will, what he has planned for humanity and the end of the earth and the rest of history. Now I want you to also turn to Jeremiah chapter 32. This will be important to see. It's a little bit of a longer, not too long of a passage, but Jeremiah 32, verse 6. I'm going to read from 6 to 15. Turn to Jeremiah 32, because this will also help us understand what's going on here as well. Jeremiah 32, and go to verse 6, and I'll read to verse 15. But to give you a backstory, what's going on here is Jeremiah is actually, I believe, in prison at this point. And in this passage, there's a sealed deed, which was used to signify ownership and right to redemption. If you remember, like the Jubilee and all that kind of stuff, there's all these things with the land. Well, there's also these redemption laws, if you know about this. And there could be a person named a Goel, G-O-E-L in Hebrew. Basically, if you lost your land, you couldn't afford it, and you lost it, somebody related to you, your closest kinsman, could actually buy back the land, buy back the property. So here's what it says in Jeremiah 32, verses 6 through 15. And by the way, he's about to buy land from his cousin. His cousin's Hanamel. We're going to read about this here. Jeremiah said, the word of the Lord came to me. Behold, Hanamel, the son of Shallum, your uncle, will come to you and say, buy my field that is at Anathoth, for the right of redemption by purchase is yours. Then Hanamel, my cousin, came to me in the court of the guard in accordance with the word of the Lord and said to me, buy my field that is at Anathoth in the land of Benjamin, for the right of possession and redemption is yours. Buy it for yourself. Then I knew that this was the word of the Lord. And I bought the field at Anathoth from Hanamel, my cousin, and weighed out the money to him, 17 shekels of silver. I signed the deed, sealed it, got witnesses, and weighed the money on scales. Then I took, look at that, the sealed deed of purchase, containing the terms and conditions in the open copy. And I gave the deed of purchase to Baruch, the son of Neriah, son of Maaseiah, in the presence of Hanamel, my cousin, in the presence of the witnesses, who signed the deed of purchase, and in the presence all the Judeans who were sitting in the court of the guard. I charged Baruch in their presence, saying, thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, take these deeds, both this sealed deed of purchase and this open deed, and put them in an earthenware vessel, that they may last for a long time. For thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, houses and fields and vineyards shall again be bought in this land. So this scroll here, was basically a redemption and it was a future thing. What's really interesting about Jeremiah here, he buys back the land, seals up this deed, but he's like, put it away, store it up for a longer time. It's like, didn't you just buy it? Imagine somebody bought you land. They're like, all right, you can't live on it for a while. It's like, what's going on here? Well, this is prophetic. This is why he used Jeremiah. He probably could have, God could have done some other thing or whatever, but he used Jeremiah the prophet to buy back the land of his cousin. And it's a reference basically to Israel again. This deed, it's showing, because at the end it says, for thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, it's prophetic, houses and fields and vineyards shall again be bought in this land. When was Jeremiah? Well, that was the time that the Babylonians had taken over the land of Israel, right? And God was always making these promises. One day you'll return. You're not going to be gone forever. You won't be exiled forever. You will return to this land. And one day you'll have houses and fields and vineyards again. That's why it's stored up in this vessel, and later on it will be open. But it's interesting, it's a deed that is sealed here. That's going to need redemption. And that's going to play into this, because I believe this seal here not only is a divine plan of God's will, like I said, God's will for all of history and how history ends and what's going to happen, and that nobody can add to it. Satan, the angels, nobody can add to God's plan. It's written on the front and the back, but it's rolled up and sealed. And I believe this is a deed to the earth, the rest of the earth. And we'll talk more about that as I go. And that's why I wanted you to read that along with me. And it says, of course, like sealed with 7 seals. So 7 seals signifies perfection and divine completeness. We keep seeing that 7 over and over and over. And sealed documents were common back in Roman law. It was important for wills, covenants, and as we saw, deeds. So this is very important to do. A sealed book also symbolized hidden truth and divine mystery, which only God can reveal. Isaiah 29, I'll just read this so you don't have to flip there, but Isaiah 29, verse 11 and 12, listen to what it says. And the vision of all this has become to you like the words of a book that is sealed. When men give it to one who can read, saying, read this, he says, I cannot, for it is sealed. And when they give the book to one who cannot read, saying, read this, he says, I cannot read. So it's really interesting. You'll see this language kind of pop up here, but Isaiah is saying here, sometimes it can't be read because a person can't read and can't understand, which we'll see that in a little bit, or it's sealed and you can't open it, right? So there's 2 reasons why it couldn't be read, and that's usually when something is sealed, it is a divine sealing. Remember Daniel chapter 12, I'll mention it probably later, he had to seal up the book until the end. Remember, Daniel had to seal and conceal, right? To hide and seal until a later time. This whole book's called Revelation, to reveal. That's why we're about to see the scroll be opened, the seals be opened. Remember, that's how the judgments start in chapter 6 when we get to it. So we're seeing the opposite. This thing was sealed, just like Jeremiah had a scroll sealed for the deed. I believe there's a deed of the earth in God's plan sealed up here, showing that it's hidden. And only God, like Isaiah talked about, only God can kind of make that happen. We see here God's sovereignty and control over history. Nobody can open this up. Nobody can see what's going to happen, and nobody can add to it, which is really interesting here. And again, you can see we're going now from creation to, you're going to see redemption. Verse number 2. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice, who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals? So John now looks, he sees this scroll, and now all of a sudden a mighty angel comes on the scene, which we didn't see. The only angelic beings we saw last were probably the cherubim, seraphim, something like that. Now there's an angel here, and it's a mighty one, which some people will say, is this Gabriel, is this Michael? Maybe, but it doesn't name them. And it's not really important to know, again, is it Gabriel or Michael? It's just some strong angel. Now, why doesn't it just say now an angel proclaimed? Why does it say a mighty angel? Well, I think the term mighty here implies that even one of heaven's most powerful beings cannot open the scroll, right? So divine strength alone is insufficient without being worthy, we're going to find out. That it's not about, oh, I can't bust a seal, like when my son says, open up my soda because I can't get the cap. That's because he's not strong enough, right? I just have a little more strength in him. That it's showing has nothing to do with strength. There's a mighty angel here saying, who can open this? Means he couldn't, Or wouldn't he have just opened it? So like, who is worthy? And he says, worthy to open the scroll and break its seals. But look, he's proclaiming with a loud voice. So it's like a cosmic announcement. And you'll see a lot of times these things shouted or yelled or proclaimed. Even Isaiah 40, verse 3 talks about somebody who cries out in the wilderness. Remember, John the Baptist was crying out, preparing the way for the Lord. That's where you see that loud voice again. Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals? Again, there had to be some kind of moral or spiritual qualification, not power. And we're going to talk about, again, as we get to Jesus, let me kind of jump ahead of myself a little bit. We know that Jesus is going to open this in a little bit here. But again, we want to look at Ruth chapter 4. Go to Ruth chapter 4. Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals? We're going to see a little story here. It's going to be 10 verses. Ruth chapter 4, verse 1 through 10. And this is also helpful in understanding what's going on here. Who is worthy to open the scroll? Now we're going to see from this, back in the day, to be worthy to buy back the land to redeem the land, like I believe Jesus is redeeming the earth, and I'll talk about why in a little bit here, but you had to be the next person in line. You had to be the one that was able to do it, and you had to be related, right? You had to have some kind of relation, some blood relation. Ruth chapter 4, verse 1 through 10. This is where Boaz redeems Ruth, if you remember this story. Let's just actually go right down there. Right, here it is, yep. Now, Ruth chapter 4, verses 1 through 10. Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the Redeemer, which is Jesus called Redeemer a lot, of whom Boaz had spoken, came by. So what's happened here is Boaz wanted, if you remember the story, Boaz wanted to redeem. He was going to redeem the land, and they found out. They said, wait, hold on, Boaz. There's somebody more worthy than you. There's somebody that is closer in relation to Ruth, so you're not worthy enough to redeem it. Actually, this guy, there's somebody else that can do it. So this is a whole situation about who is worthy to redeem, right? And it says he spoke, Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, turn aside, friend, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. So they sat down. Then he said to the Redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders. Isn't that interesting? The presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it. Interesting language. And I come after you. It means I'm not worthy. You are to redeem it. And he said, I will redeem it. Then Boaz said, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth, the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. Then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was the manner of his testing in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, he drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to all the elders and all the people, all the elders, isn't that interesting? You are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon, and to Mahlon. Also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife. Wife language, interesting. To perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses to this day. Again, prophetic. You don't realize that some people say, Dr. Mizler actually would say, if you don't understand the book of Ruth, you can't fully understand the book of Revelation. Why? Because what we just read is almost a prophetic pattern. You have somebody who's worthy to open the scroll. Boaz wants to do it, but there's somebody more worthy than him. You can see that worthiness. And he had to redeem it to buy a wife. What is Jesus going to do? His bride, the church, right? He had to do it in the presence of witnesses as well. And it was all about this title deed, the deed to that land. And I believe this is a deed to the earth again, like I said. So you can see that prophetic pattern here of what's going to happen. It's going to be opened in front of elders by the one worthy, the Redeemer, to redeem the people and the land. Because that's what he did. Not only redeem the land, but redeem the people. Ruth and Naomi were redeemed as well. And why is this whole thing going about, like, Eric, where are you getting this thing that this is the land deed to the earth and it's going to be redeemed? Where does that come from? Well, Jesus is going to redeem and inherit the earth. It talks about this. Daniel 7, verse 13 and 14 talk about how Jesus is given dominion, right? And if you remember, think of it this way. In the beginning, Adam was given, right? He was given earth to have dominion over, right? A proxy for God to see over all the land, the animals, and the creation. And when he fell, some make the argument, some theologically argue this, is that he lost it when he fell from heaven. We had kicked out of the garden, I should say, kicked out of the garden. He lost access, and that's why Satan is now, some people say, the god of this world. He has this world. And this is why, if you remember, I know this is my notes, but it makes sense now. If you think of Jesus being tempted, remember one of the things that Satan did? I'll give you all the kingdoms. I'll give you all of the earth if you just bow and worship me. Jesus says, I'm not doing that. Why? Because Jesus knows, of course, he came to conquer, and he came to re-inherit the nations, re-inherit the earth. And I think this is what's going on here. Psalm 2, verses 7 through 9 actually talk about this. I will tell of the decree. The Lord said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. So Jesus is going to re-inherit this, right? What Adam had lost and Satan stole, the Lord is taking back, right? And that's what this is referring to here. Verse number 3, and no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look into it. So no one, you can see there's a threefold situation here. No one in heaven, so no angels can open it. Remember that mighty angel, why didn't he open it? Because nobody in heaven has the worthiness or the power to be able to open it. On the earth, of course, no living humanity. Why? Because we're all sinful. We all have to be redeemed by his blood anyway. So we have no worth without the Lord blessing us and what he's done for us to even be in heaven, right? And then under the earth. Under the earth, what is that? Does that mean like the insects and the bugs? No. That means the realm of the dead. That's how they referred to it. When you go down to Sheol, even still people talk like this today. You'll hear sometimes people aren't totally Christian, but they believe in the afterlife. Those kind of people like, I want to go up there, not down there. Do you ever hear people say that kind of language? I want to go up there, not down there. And the Bible does use that language, probably dimensionally. It's probably more about dimensions than actually in the earth and all that kind of stuff. But that's what it means when under the earth. So no angel in heaven, no human here living, and nobody who's dead could. And why nobody dead? Well, Jesus isn't dead. He's alive, right? So there's a threefold thing. And that mirrors Philippians 2, verse 10 has that same kind of language. That the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth. So we've actually seen this kind of language. You go to Philippians, you'll see that same kind of language there. But it means total, everything in the universe, heaven, human, dead, nothing is worthy. So this is a problem. They were not able to open the scroll or look into it. And I talked about that verse in Isaiah earlier. Why couldn't they read it? Well, they couldn't open it, right? Can't open it. It's sealed. Why else? They can't look into it because they can't comprehend it. God's plan is incomprehensible to the human mind until it's broken down and laid out for us. So nobody could open the scroll or look into it, meaning they couldn't, just kind of like Isaiah. Nobody could comprehend it. Nobody could even open the thing. And I talked earlier again about how Daniel had to seal it up just like this is here. Verse number 4, and I began, that's John, to weep loudly because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look into it. So weeping loudly is like this audible wail. If you've heard somebody sob and they're so loud and you look over like, what's going on? Something's wrong there. He was audibly in a loud, kind of forceful kind of weeping, right? Very similar to, there's language like this in Psalm 119, verse 136. It says, my eyes shed streams of tears because people do not keep your law. And by the way, that's why we're not worthy, because we didn't keep God's law. So you can see that prophetic language in Psalm 119. There's somebody weeping bitterly in the psalm here because people do not keep God's law. And John's weeping reflects the same grief over human sin and separation from God, because nobody is worthy. Why is he overwhelmed? Nobody is worthy. That's the problem. And Romans 3:10 said the same kind of thing. None is righteous, no, not one. So it's that same thing going on here. And what's the problem? Well, like the whole problem is he's weeping because he sees, he knows this is the deed to re-inherit the earth. This is God's full plan of humanity. And if he doesn't open it, he has a job. Remember, he's supposed to reveal everything that is going to come. He's supposed to tell everybody, how's he going to do this if you can't get it open, right? It kind of reminds me, like, think of this. Like, somebody says, hey, I'm going to give you $1 billion in this bank account, in this nice mansion. You and your family are going to go out there and stay as long as you want. You don't have to work if you don't want to, and you guys all get there. And then say, all right, well, it's locked. Who can get in? It's like, I don't have a key. I don't have a key. And the only person that has the key is not there. You'd be like, this is no good to us. Nothing's going to happen. We can't get in here. We can't access this. And that would probably make us a little upset, right? If you couldn't get this thing that you were promised, this great plan, this great amazing thing that was in your future, and you're all at all these high hopes, and then you get there and you're locked out. John is locked out. So that's like a human nature thing. What am I going to do? Am I not going to be able to open this? Or am I not going to be able to tell? Are we never going to finish this? And he knows God's plan. He knows God keeps his promise, but he might even thinking this is delaying it. Even if you get into the place, even if you're going to get in, like this is delaying it. I want it to happen now. I was all excited about this, and I don't know when this is ever going to happen because I'm finding out nobody's worthy. And the angel's asking, and nobody's stepping up because nobody is worthy, right? And to open the scroll, look into it, like I said. So if nobody could open it, history would remain unfulfilled, and evil would remain unjudged. That's the other problem. Because remember, there's going to have judgments in there too, judging all the sin and the evil. So sin would continue to run rampant on the earth. There's a lot of things going on here. All right, let's go to the next verse, verse number 5. And one of the elders said to me, weep no more. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has conquered so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals. So you have one of the elders. So who's that elder? Well, we don't know which one it is, but it's one of the 24. We saw those 24 elders. Remember, they're there as witnesses. They're there as, like in this title deed situation. But one of them comes up and comforts John, not the angel, but an elder, right? It says, weep no more. And this reminds me, again, you can see all these kind of patterns in the Bible. Turn to John chapter 20. This is really interesting. Turn to John chapter 20 and go to verse 13. We'll read 4 of the verses. So here we have in heaven, while you're turning there to John chapter 20, verse 13, we have in heaven, John's weeping. He's so sad about the state of what's going on. And this elder comes up and says, don't worry, don't weep, weep no more. Everything's going to be okay. John 20, verse 13. They said to her, woman, why are you weeping? She said to them, this is talking about Mary, by the way, at the tomb. They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him. Having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking? Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away. Jesus said to her, Mary. And she turned and said to him in Aramaic, Rabboni, which means teacher. So you can see that same thing happening here. Mary weeping. Why? In our humanness, there's no hope anymore. There's no hope. Jesus is dead. He came to save. He was a great healer, and he's dead. It says, woman, why are you weeping? Weep no more. Basically, the situation here, she stops weeping and gets excited. Why? Because Jesus shows up, right? Which is the same pattern that's going to happen here, right? John now weeping. Why? There's no hope. It's hopeless. It looks hopeless. And then he has this, I can imagine the hand on the shoulder, maybe this elder saying, weep no more. And next thing we're going to see is Jesus show up. That same pattern, weeping, looking hopeless, and then Jesus shows up. That's literally how salvation usually starts, by the way. Think about that. People that are saved usually are hopeless, rock bottom, and then the Lord opens their eyes. They're weeping. They have no hope in life. And then the Lord shows up. So you can see that pattern here. Now he says, weep no more. Behold the Lion of the tribe of Judah. So the Lion of the tribe of Judah, where does that come from? Well, Genesis 49, verses 9 and 10. You don't have to turn there, but if you remember, in Genesis 49, got all those prophecies. Jacob had all those prophecies, and one of them was about Judah is like a lion's cub, and that the scepter shall not depart from Judah. This is why we call Jesus the Lion of the tribe of Judah. It's prophetic all the way back to Genesis. So this is a term for Jesus, right? And the lion, of course, shows his royalty, his strength, his victorious power. He's king over all kings. He's Lord over all lords, God over all gods. You can see that there, which is also interesting. The root of the tribe of Judah, the king here, you got to understand, and we're going to see this more in this chapter, his second coming is not like his first coming. His first coming, he was gentle. He was the lamb, a lamb led to the slaughter. He's going to come back in his second coming like the lion, right? It's going to be a very different approach. He's coming to get victory, right? And that's what's going to happen there. And then, of course, I love what the Bible does. In case you weren't short the line of tribe of Judah, it says the root of David. He gets a second term. The line of the tribe of Judah, the root of David. Where does that come from? Well, Isaiah 11, verse 1, there shall come from a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. Or Jeremiah, we were in there earlier, but Jeremiah 23, verses 5 and 6 says, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will raise up for David a righteous branch, and he shall reign as king and deal wisely, and shall execute justice and righteousness in the land. In his days, Judah, is interesting, will be saved, and Israel will dwell securely. And this is the name by which he will be called. The Lord is our righteousness. So this is where he comes from, the root of David. This is why the son of David, if you notice throughout the Bible, God's always narrowing it down, right? He tells Eve, what from your seed, is going to come the Messiah. Then it's Abraham, and then it keeps going, and then it's David. So we all we call him the son of David, right? But it's really, really interesting because the son of David wouldn't be the root of where David came from, right? That sounds kind of confusing. But we do know that it's the truth, right? That Jesus is before David. Even though he's the son of David that came after him in the earthly manner, he's actually before him, right? And what's really interesting is Jesus himself confirmed this paradox. Because, like, how can he be the root? That's why some of them didn't accept Jesus, by the way, because they thought he was a son. Like, how could he be, before Abraham was, I am, that was blasphemous to them. And they didn't think he couldn't be the root of David, right? Because he's the son of that line, David. Jesus talked about this himself in Matthew chapter 22. Turn to Matthew chapter 22 if you can. Matthew chapter 22 and go to verse 42. Jesus is going to show that he's both David's descendant, but he's also David's creator. How could that be? It seems like a paradox. And the Lord is full of paradoxes that break our mind. But that's how it is, and we know that's how it is because Jesus came before all things, but he only came incarnate through the David's line. All right, Matthew 22, verse 42. And we'll go to verse 45. And this is what Jesus says. What do you think about the Christ? Whose son is he? They said to him, the son of David. He said to them, how is it then that David in the Spirit calls him Lord, saying, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet. If then David calls him Lord, how is he his son? So it's really interesting. What Jesus is pointing out here is like, I'm not just the son of David as you think of it. I'm also his creator. I am his Lord. While you call me the son of David, I'm also his Lord. It's that paradox. But what it's really showing, what Jesus is telling them here is he's showing his eternal deity, that he is God. He's the creator above. That's what he's trying to point out here. I'm not just David's son. I am God. I am his creator. So he's showing his eternal existence and that he is God over all things. Yet, why does he call himself the son of David? Because it's showing his humanness, right? And then he's going to be the human king that was promised in 2 Samuel 7. Remember 2 Samuel chapter 7? David was promised to have a son to live on the throne forever and ever and ever. And of course, Solomon, he encapsulated that in the beginning, but there's these things called dual fulfillment. We all really saw that prophecy not only as Solomon, but as Jesus Christ. We use that a lot to show that that's why Jesus has to reign on earth, to fulfill that covenant promise. Why is it important that Jesus was a human? We talk about this all the time. That's why God can't just be, or Jesus can't be only God or only human. He has to be fully God and fully human. And it comes importance in this thing about opening up these seals here. Why is that? Because we read about the kinsman redeemer. If Jesus were only God, he would not be a kinsman to Adam. He would not be worthy enough to open the scroll, not because he wasn't God, but because according to the deeds and being able to re-inherit land, you had to be a family, right? So how is he going to get the earth back? Well, he's the most qualified human, right? The most qualified, so he had to have that humanness for that reason. That's why he had to redeem us. Why couldn't he just be God and redeem us without sacrifice? Well, because, we owe a penalty of death. And God couldn't pay for the penalty for death without being man as well. He had to come in as man and take man's penalty as man. So that's why it seems like a dichotomy, and people argue this for centuries and centuries, actually millennium now at this point, about is Jesus fully God? The Gnostics talk about, oh no, he was just, he's either fully God or he's fully man, but there's none of this both. He is both God and man, and this is why it's important, and this is why he did it. It sounds like a paradox to our minds, but you can comprehend it a little bit when you start to dive into these things. So it's important to notice there. And it says that he's the one, because he's conquered. We keep seeing that word here. He conquered. To those of you who conquer, remember he said that before, because he conquered was always the thing going on here. But so he can open the scroll and it's 7 seals, right? And what did Jesus conquer? Well, according to Romans 8, he conquered sin. According to 1 Corinthians 15, another place, he conquered death. In Hebrews, it says he conquered Satan. And John 16, he conquered the world. So talking about he's conquered all these things, sin, death, Satan, and the world. So he can now re-inherit this, right? His worthiness is based on his victory through the cross and his resurrection. Coming back from the dead, he defeated death. That's why it's important to believe in the resurrection. That's why it's important there's some people out there that will say, well, Jesus did all these things, but he didn't really die. And, people can come back from the dead. We've buried people alive before. And they probably just didn't check his pulse. And science wasn't really, the doctors weren't really as good back then. And no, he died and he came back from the dead because he defeated death. That was another key important thing here, right? He has the right to open them. Jesus is both, and that's the other thing, the paradox here. He's both lion and lamb. We see these paradoxes. He's both the creator of David and the son of David. He's both a lion and a lamb in very big contrast, right? Let's do verse number 6 now. And between the throne and the 4 living creatures and among the elders, I saw a lamb standing, as though it had been slain, with 7 horns and with 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. This one's really interesting. Here's the contrast again. Lion and lamb. So between the throne and the 4 living creatures, and among the elders, I saw a lamb standing. So now he's using that language that we saw in chapter 4. Between the throne, the 4 living creatures, remember those creatures are there guarding. They're the throne guardians. And among the elders, so the elders are there, right? So the lamb is at the center of heavenly worship, right? With that throne. We're going back to the throne focus now, and that's where the lamb's at. So the lamb is ruling on the throne. And what's interesting, he is standing, right? He's standing here. So the lamb's standing. That's kind of interesting because it's a slain lamb. So it's a slain lamb, though he's alive and active and standing. What does that mean? Well, that slain is just kind of referring to his sacrifice. We don't know what it really looked like, but somehow he's able to see. It was very evident that this was a sacrificial lamb. Might have seen blood and everything there. Yet he was alive and standing. You can see the resurrection of Jesus in there, right? The lamb who was slain but is alive and walking around today. That's obviously what it's referring to there, which is really interesting. And it kind of goes back to that language. Why is he the lamb that is slain? Well, Isaiah 53, verse 7. He was oppressed, he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth, like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before it shears us out, so he opened not his mouth. So here's that paradox again. Victory through apparent weakness. It's weird how to win victory, Jesus had to become the weakest creature. We think of sheep. They have no offense. They have no horns like goats and things like that. They have no offense. And so it's the weakest animal, and that's how he acquired victory. You can see all these paradoxes. The king-lamb paradox, right? He's sovereign, but yet he's sacrificial. It's hard for our minds to understand, but that's how it works, right? Then it says with 7 horns. Horns in Scripture symbolize power. You'll see these horns on the altar. Every time you see horns, later on you're going to see Antichrist as the little horn. Horn means power and strength in the Bible. Psalm 18, verse 2 says, "The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold," right? So 7 horns, complete, utter strength. He has 7 horns, means he has full and complete strength. With 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. This is reminiscent of Zechariah 4. I won't make you turn there, but listen to Zechariah 4, verse 10. "For whoever has despised the day of small things shall rejoice, and shall see the plumb line in the hand of Zerubbabel. These 7 are the eyes of the Lord, which range through the whole earth." What's really interesting here, we see 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. This is reminiscent of Zechariah 4. By the way, if you've never read Zechariah, go ahead and read the book of Zechariah, because it's a very end times prophetic book. You'll see a lot of this language in that book. But the 7 eyes, perfect knowledge, perfect awareness, going out into all the earth. Remember, Jesus doesn't miss anything going on the earth because of his quote-unquote 7 eyes. Does that merely mean he has 7 eyes on his face? Probably not. But this is all symbolizing that he can see everything going on earth. He's standing. He's a sacrificed lamb, but he's still standing. And he's in control, and he's on the throne, right? Which is pretty amazing. So there's power through sacrifice. Jesus at the center of the redemption. And you can see the Spirit of God is at work in all this, right? The Spirit of God is always pointing to the Lord and Jesus and doing his work as well. And let's do one more verse. Verse number 7. "And he went and took the scroll from the right hand of him who was seated on the throne." So the lamb, who was previously described as slain, yet standing, now moves with authority and takes the scroll out of the hand, showing that he's worthy. Because who could take the scroll? Nobody's worthy. Now he comes and takes it out of the right hand, right? That powerful hand. The hand that was clenched, that didn't let it go until somebody was worthy. And he's the one that takes it. By the way, I didn't touch on this, but how interesting is it that right before the lamb shows up and takes this scroll, what was he told? I'll go back here. What was John told to not worry about? The Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David. So when John was weeping, he looked up. He probably imagined to see some lion, but he saw this lamb. Isn't that interesting? And it also goes to show sometimes what we expect when we get God's revelation or prophecy or his Bible, we try to guess, just like his disciples did. Oh, Jesus must be here. Remember his first coming? Jesus is here because he's going to take over and he's going to conquer the Romans, right? They expected because he was the king of all kings. They had their own idea of what it meant when it was really Jesus going to die his first coming. He's going to do all that his second coming. So you can see that confusion I'm sure John had. He probably looked up like, don't worry, there's a lion that'll take care of this. You look up like, all right, where's he at? There's a lamb. Like, that's very different than a lion. So you can see what he probably expected is now completely different. And a lot of times what we expect God's plan to be ends up being a little bit different than what we expected. It's always true because he is the lion, right? But he's also the lamb. And so you can kind of imagine, I just imagine like what John must have thought when he's looking for a lion. He doesn't see a lion. He just sees the lamb. But the lamb takes the scroll. So the lamb is worthy from the right hand of him, right? Which is also interesting. So he took it from the right hand. He's not on the left of God, right? He's on the right hand of God, which Psalm 110 talks about. God places his king as the right hand to rule over the nations. The Lord says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. So here we are. It's kind of that fulfillment at the right hand. The scroll rests in God's right hand, indicating that the contents of the scroll, judgment, redemption, and fulfillment of prophecy are also under his divine authority. Again, you can see that divine authority there. And we'll go ahead and stop before I go any further into verse number 8. So we'll just kind of stop there as what's going on. And next week we might find out, I don't know, we might finish this up and maybe roll right into chapter 6. You'll see this kind of nicely and neatly works right itself into chapter 6. But does anybody have any questions, thoughts, or comments that came to mind from what we just went over here in Revelation 5 or anything else in the Bible that might come to your mind from all of this? Anybody? Beard. Yeah.
So I'm just looking at this with God who is all-powerful, has a scroll in his hand. It's like, why can't he open it? But is that part of the Redeemer structure that the person who currently holds the seal or the scroll holds the deed for the land, they can't redeem it? It needs to be someone close to the person.
Correct. So because he had the deed of the land, and Satan's kind of taken over it. So people argue that maybe he hasn't, but he has. But that was kind of the situation. Who has it? So you'd have to have somebody come and take the deed. What's interesting is usually in the situation, say there was somebody who was controlling and had all the deeds sealed up, like we talked about in the story of Ruth. There's probably somebody there and saying, just somebody come and get who's able and worthy to redeem this. They would have handed off. The interesting thing here is because God takes it from God. Like that. So that's why it's confusing. He is worthy to open it, but he's setting up the scene to follow those prophetic things. And why he did that, I think to show again why Jesus had to do all those things, why he had to come and live as a man and die, and so he could be the one to redeem us. He is our kinsman redeemer, our Goel, that the whole structure of Ruth, that whole redeeming the land, that's what it's really referring to. But yeah, I believe that is the structure, Beard. I think you're onto something there where he could have, God had the power to do it, but God also had the power to do it. It's kind of confusing. But through Jesus, because remember, God is 3 in 1, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and the Son was the worthy one to open it because he is the one that lived in the body of a man, right? He's fully man and fully God, so he was the one worthy. So they go through this process here. It blows our mind how God can hand it to God, but he does. But yeah, it is to follow that prophetic structure. And you see, that's what's so cool about when you read the Bible. You read these things happen, and sometimes you're like, oh, that was an interesting detail, but that's cool. Boaz redeemed it. Then you go back and read it, and it's like, wait a minute. He opened up this deed of earth, of land, in front of elders, right? And there's this whole thing about who, and it's even funny, you see the dilemma there. Boaz wanted to do it, but he was not worthy compared to this other person to open it. So you can see there's always, who is the most worthy? There's always somebody the most worthy. Because Boaz was a kinsman, but he couldn't redeem it until he became the most worthy one. The other ones denied it basically because he didn't want to get married. He at first wanted it and then, got rid of it. But you're seeing that pattern here. That's why Jesus is the only one worthy to open that. That was a good question and thought. Anybody else? Yeah, Beard, go ahead. You got another one.
Further on that in Ruth, can we see this other person as sort of an allusion to Christ because he's unnamed? At this point, it is not his time to redeem, so he surrenders that to the next person in line.
That's pretty.
And then Boaz actually does it.
That's great insight. Yeah, because what's really interesting is you'll find out, of course, the Bible, sometimes we read it like it's a linear story, which it is, by the way. It is linear. It goes from beginning to end, but it's also layered. That's why I always talk about you can jet ski across a lake or you can dive to the bottom and see what's going on. They're two different activities, right? And you usually get across the lake faster if you jet ski, right? But if you deep dive, it's going to take a lot longer. But there are layers. There's things when you go under, when you go deeper, you can see that aren't there. And I believe the Bible, you can continually peel back the layers. So I think you're exactly right here, that he is unnamed. It wasn't his time yet. And then Boaz comes, but later on it is his time. And you see that's a lot of prophetic patterns here. You know, they want to say like, Jesus, I want to go tell you, no, don't tell anybody. It's not my time yet. He even tells the demons like, shut up. It's not my time. Don't tell anybody. So you could see that pattern here as it wasn't time, but there would be a day that he would open up the most worthy of them. So that's a really great insight as well. And you can find all kinds of these layers and stuff in old passages of the Bible. And it's amazing to see how God buried them. And I love that Revelation brings out the best in all of this stuff. And I love that somebody called it the Grand Central Station of the Bible. That all the books pass through this Revelation book. That's where they all converge and meet together, which is pretty amazing. Anybody else have any thoughts or comments or questions before we close? Yeah, Paul.
The Lamb is Jesus, right?
Yes. Yes.
Is he changing his appearance, or is John just seeing him?
That's a great question. And a lot of people wonder, what is he going to look like? I think we're going to see Jesus as a person, but again, this might be symbology of pointing to a real truth. He sees Jesus, but what we're seeing here is we know for a fact he might be seeing a real lamb. He might be getting these weird visions of how God wanted to reveal it. But basically the essence we can take is he's seeing Jesus, and it's obviously known, I think it will be to us too, that he has shed his blood and sacrificed. I think we'll always know that we still, like, if you remember, his glorified body is a little bit different than ours because he has scars on his hands. I don't think we're going to have scars, but he is, right? Our scars are going to be gone. We're going to have a perfect body, but if Jesus got his glorified body, he's got scars on his hands and feet. Why? Because I think it's the same way the disciples saw him. You can see him as a sacrificed lamb at all times. We'll always be able to know what he did for us, I believe is what it's showing. I don't think he's going to have 7 eyes and look like a sheep or anything like that. He could if he wanted to, I don't know. But I think this is more pointing to the fact that when we see him in heaven, we'll be fully aware that he has full control, full power over everything, and he was the one that sacrificed and the reason that we're even there. So that was a really great question. A lot of people debate about that, what's going on here. But I believe this is symbolic of what that we'll be able to notice that he was the sacrificed lamb at all times, which is why Thomas had to, feel the scars in his hands and stuff. So, well, thank you again, everybody, for coming to another Bible study. Go ahead and read ahead. We'll finish up chapter 5. Depending on how much time we have, I might even start into chapter 6 when you'll see how this all plays in together if you haven't read it. But have a great week, everybody. Until next time, keep your lamps trimmed and burning.